we look at medical aid schemes in the country. And today's discussion emanates from an opinion piece that was written by Mr. Brian Watson, who's an executive at Genesis Medical Scheme. And he, in his opinion piece, exposed what he calls some hidden truths by large medical schemes. He's even gone as far as mentioning Discovery Health and Momentum as well. We've invited all of them for this discussion, and we'd also like your contribution as well, because you have a story to tell when it comes to medical aid schemes. So please do call us on 0891 104 207, and our SMS line is 34701. And joining us this morning is Mr. Brian Watson, an executive at Genesis Medical Scheme. He's in our Cape Town studios, and he wrote the article. Mr. Watson, good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Rowena, and thank you for this invitation to speak on your program.
Thank you for joining us. Dr. Jonathan Broomberg is in the studio with me. Dr. Broomberg is the CEO of Discovery Health. Good morning to you, Dr.
Good morning,
Broomberg.
Rowena. Thanks again for the invitation.
Absolutely. And Mr. Damien McHugh, he's the head of sales and marketing at Momentum Health. He joins us for a short while. Mr. McHugh, thank you very much for coming through.
Great. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Mr. Watson, shall we start with you? I mean, and talk about the article that you wrote that I alluded to. The gist is really that there are many unsubstantiated facts which are used out of context in the medical aid industry, and which have become the universal truth in inverted commas. And before you list these, tell us why you decided to write this, being in the medical aid industry yourself.
Rowena, it's very simple, because in our view, the public doesn't have an equal opportunity of understanding what medical aid's all about. We hear frequently cries of rip-off, and they take my money, they don't settle claims, and so on. And it's possibly all caused by a lack of understanding or a poor understanding of how the industry works. Mm-hmm. So if we go back a step, what does the public in general rely on for its information? And it's traditionally the media, whether that's print or vocal or whatever. And my point is that very often medical schemes say things that remain unchallenged by the press, and they are then accepted by the public as being correct, and so a perception is then created. And more particularly, if we look at size, the big schemes all go along and say, we're in the top 10, or we're the biggest, etc. Why is that? Why?
Okay, and I'd like us to in a little bit explore what determines size of a medical aid scheme. Is it membership numbers, figures, or is it the reserves that you have? We'll talk about that a little later. But Dr. Broomberg, to bring you in, what were your thoughts and your reaction when you saw this piece?
Rowena, thanks. Look, I think there are a number of misleading elements in the piece. And the first point, just to pick up on what Brian's saying now, is actually the public get most of their information and make their decisions on medical schemes actually in consultation with their brokers. So these are products that are bought on the advice of licensed brokers. And I think the brokers do understand very clearly where strength lies in medical schemes, where the benefits are richest and where the premiums are lowest. And the truth of the matter is that over the last 5-6 years, there's been an enormous shift of membership out of many medical schemes towards one or two that have been growing. In particular, Discovery Health Medical Scheme has gained 600,000 members in the last 6 years. And I think people are voting with their feet. So I think this,
what do you attribute that exodus from the other medical aid schemes to your scheme too?
I think fundamentally it's about value. So people are looking at where can they get the richest benefits. The Discovery Medical Scheme offers 21 options, so from the very richest benefits to much more affordable options at the lowest premiums on average in the market. So we'll talk about those more. I think it's also about service, and in contrast to the Genesis statement, it is about size and stability. There have been several small medical schemes in the last few years that have gone belly up. In a small medical scheme, a small number of big claims can tip the whole medical scheme into insolvency. And I think that brokers are advising members, and members have had experiences, or their families have had, of schemes leaving them high and dry. And you do need to be with a large scheme with large reserves to ensure that you will never have a problem where your scheme leaves you high and dry.
And that really is the ideal, isn't it? Being a large scheme in terms of membership, but also having large reserves. And is that always the case?
Well, I mean, I think that the reserves are absolutely crucial. The Genesis statement talks about a high reserves per member. It's typical of smaller schemes, and particularly schemes that have been losing membership. And Genesis has lost 10% of its membership in the last few years, that they will have a higher reserve per member because the members leave their reserves behind. So if you lose 10% of your membership, you'll have 10% more reserves per member left behind.
Okay.
But can I just finish the point? But the problem is that reserves per member are not the key issue. It's the absolute size of the reserves. If you take Genesis's reserves, which are 275 million at the end of last year, the top 100 claims that Discovery had last year, just 100 out of 1.2 million families
exceeded that.
So just 100 claims, and that can happen to any medical scheme. Genesis has 7,000 members. They could have had those big 100 claims, and the scheme would have been finished. So the size does matter.
All right, and we will talk about that a little bit more with you, Mr. Watson. But just to bring you in, Mr. McHugh, and get your thoughts and your reactions to the statement by Genesis. I know that you've issued a press release in this regard. Can you share that with us, please?
Sure. I think, and Dr. Bloomberg makes very valid points, and I guess, Brian does the same. I think, at Momentum Health, we were accused in there of lying about our average age, because the information that I shared was not in the public domain. So we obtained the information of the principal member average age from Global Credit Ratings, which is an independent rating agency which a number of the medical schemes subscribe to. So the information that I shared was 100% correct. So that was the information that we had shared within the report.
Mr. McHugh, can you put this into context for us,
sure,
please, for somebody who may not be aware of what you're talking about? We're talking here about the fact that Genesis mentioned Momentum as having boasted the lowest average member age out of the top 10 open medical schemes in South Africa. And what was your point, Mr. Watson? You were saying this cannot be the case because there are no published statistics, right?
That is correct. There's a published statistic on the average age per beneficiary, but not on per age of principal member. Okay,
let's go back to Mr. McHugh. Mr. McHugh, now where did you get your statistics from?
As I indicated, a number of the medical schemes, I also just want to highlight, we didn't say the top 10 medical schemes, we said the top 10 medical schemes by size. Okay, so it was a comparison of ourselves against the other 9 larger medical schemes. So we didn't compare ourselves to Genesis as an example in that analysis, because it was just of the larger ones. And we can debate whether that should be the case or not, but that was our comparison. And we obtained our information from a credible report. It's called Global Credit Ratings. It's an independent rating agency that rates not just the financial stability of schemes. It looks at profile, because profile is important. The older you are, the more you'll tend to claim. So younger medical schemes that have a better profile will have lower claims ratios, which is true again in our in our experience. We have a claims ratio which is below 80% within the marketplace, which is one of the lowest, and it is the lowest of the larger 10 medical schemes within the country. So that's just really our point. Whether size matters or where it doesn't matter, I'm really not that fay and really want to get involved in a huge debate around that. For us, it was around, we were accused of using information that was wrong. It's not wrong. It's available in the public domain. People can pay for those reports and read about every single medical scheme that subscribes to that. We took that information and compared ourselves against that, and it's 100% factual.
Okay, we're taking your calls as well. 0891 104 207 and SMS is on 34701. If you could tell us what your experience is with with medical aid schemes are. We'll be taking those calls. Mr. Watson, a point that you were trying to demonstrate, and which we spoke about, is the fact that Genesis had over 34,000 in reserves per member to pay claims, and like Dr. Bloomberg was saying, that's because a lot of your members were leaving, so you do have the reserves, and when your members leave, they leave behind the reserves. Firstly, tell us why the exodus from Genesis, and as compared to the other schemes that have maintained an average of just over 9,000 rands in reserves per member. Why is the per member figure important?
Rowena, firstly, if I may, I find it unfortunate that Jonathan has chosen to attack Genesis, especially using information that's not really up to date. In 2007, Genesis had lost some membership. There was a change of administrator, and members they jumped ship. Since then, we haven't lost membership. We've been steady. And if he'd done his homework, he would have found that. So it's unfortunate, as I say, he wants to use that as a basis. The fact is that Genesis is making a profit every year. And when Jonathan says that size and stability is crucial, we're saying we have no quarrel with that. It's the ability to pay claims that should be the measure of any medical scheme. So when Damien, with respect to him, we're not attacking Momentum. We're merely saying to them, why did you choose to say that I'm comparing myself to the top 10? Or the top-sized medical schemes? Why don't you compare yourself to the industry? Why are you sidelining a scheme which happens to be the fourth most solvent scheme in the country based on solvency level as measured by Regulation 29? Surely a member is concerned about the ability to pay claims. A medical scheme is nothing more than an administrator of money, in much the same way as a bank is. Depositors in a bank want to be assured that they can get their money out when they need it. And in the same way, a member of a medical scheme needs to know that if they submit a claim, it will be paid. The argument that brokers know everything, well, Jonathan, you don't want to go there. Please, you don't want to go there, with respect.
Okay. Let's take some calls. 089110, and I'll allow you to respond. Dr. Martin Jan, or Jan, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, hi there.
Hello, Dr. Jan.
Morning to you.
Welcome.
Many thanks. Yeah, once again, morning to the panel. Morning, Johnny. We've spoken recently and had some dialogue recently. One or two of the claims that Johnny made really need to be contested. That is that Discovery membership is something which is freely taken on. There are many patients, members, medical aid members who are forced to take out Discovery membership because their companies that they work for give them no other option. This has been a successful marketing exercise over many years, and you can find reference to those very many Discovery members who are not happy with their medical aid, but they have no other choice. So to say that they have got to number one through a free-willing market move is really not representative of the truth. Second thing is that when it comes to the financial plus medical aid brokers, I agree with your Genesis representative that the brokers do not represent the truth. They are notoriously bad in representing the positives of the various medical aids, and they in many ways tend to stay in the play of the larger medical aids. There are very good financial reasons for supporting one medical aid over the other. My experience as a working surgeon is that members do not know what their policies show. That seems to be in contravention of the FICA Act, the brokers have to carry lots of that responsibility. It's a very messy industry at the moment, and it needs to be cleared up.
Dr. Jan, thank you very much for your contribution. You raised very many pertinent issues. Firstly, the fact that that discovery is the biggest, in inverted commas, because there really are no options when somebody, you're not given a wide pool to choose from when you at work from your employer, and I guess that's good for you because it means you've done something good in terms of your marketing. So that's the first point he raises. He also raises the fact that brokers don't really represent the whole truth. Would you like to comment on what he had to say? And then perhaps you could also comment, Mr. McHugh.
Sure, thanks very much. So I think firstly, Martin, your point about companies, bear in mind that employers on an annual basis review their choice of medical scheme. So the market is working, and I take strong exception to your and Brian's negative comments on brokers. There are thousands of brokers out there. These are legitimate, hard-working business people. They're accredited and monitored and regulated by the Council for Medical Schemes, and they offer good and honest advice. It is true that many medical scheme members are confused and don't understand medical scheme products, but I don't think we should blame that on brokers. So employers...
Who should we be blaming it on?
I think it's a complex product, and can I come back to that in a minute, just to finish the point. Employers are choosing their medical scheme. Some of them do switch. And I'll tell you something else that's interesting. We have large numbers of employers where they do offer a choice of 2, 3, 4, 5 medical schemes. And what we find is when that choice is offered, literally nobody, sometimes 5 or 10 people in a year move away from Discovery towards the competitors. And it's the same point I made earlier. This is about value. Discovery has the widest range of options, the richest benefits, and generally the lowest premiums. And our members know that, and the members of other medical schemes know that, which is why we add 1,000 new policies every day.
Mr. McHugh, excuse me, Momentum ranks number 9 out of 25 among the open schemes in terms of the average age of the beneficiaries, not number 1 like you had intimated. I'd like you to clarify that point for us, and also perhaps if you could give us your views on Dr. Jan's call.
Yeah, I think firstly we must be clear that we're measuring two different things. When we say the average age of the principal member, and you indicate, and Brian's right, number 9 out of 25, the average age of the beneficiaries, are two different measures. So one looks at the whole family, and you divide, if let's say, for example, I was a 32-year-old single mom, and I had a 2-year-old child. The average age of the beneficiary is 32 plus 2, which is 34, and half of that is 17. So that's the average age of the beneficiary. The average age of the principal member would be 32. So those are the two different measures. We use the average age of the principal member, and it has been the industry norm for 10 years. In the last few years, as the information has been less, if you like, public, and the Council of Medical Schemes publishes the beneficiary age, the industries tend towards more of the beneficiary age. So when one looks at each one of those two measures, and neither of them are better than the other, I think there's issues with the beneficiary age as much as there's issues with the principal member age. You could be a 61-year-old and have a 2-year-old grandson that you're looking after, and it's on the medical aid, and your average age is 32. Now, is that better risk than someone who's a 32-year-old? So there are issues with using both measures, and I understand, the vice versa to using the principal member average age.
Mr. Watson,
principal member average age, and we're quite comfortable with that measure. So I think what we stated was not a lie or anything like that. So quite comfortable, 100% right. As a beneficiary age, we rank number 9. At principal member average age, out of the larger schemes, we rank number 1. There might be smaller schemes in the market who have a lower principal member average age than ours.
Mr. Watson, what's your contention with that?
My contention is this very simply, is that the so-called bigger schemes are eliminating any reference to the so-called smaller schemes. And I find that unfair. There are 26 or so open medical schemes in the market. Why not compare yourself to all of them? Now, the Medical Schemes Act, for better or worse, determines that every scheme must hold a solvency reserve of 25% of its gross annual contributions. And a number of the so-called big schemes are in breach of the law. Now, whether you think the law is correct or not, it is the law. And I'm interested to know by what right they have to disregard the law and carry on pontificating themselves as being holier than thou. I don't think it's right. So my issue with Momentum, it was purely for illustration points. Purposes. We have no gripe with Damien or his medical scheme. It's just to say that why did you limit your comparison to the top 10 schemes? And why does everybody accept that number of members is the yardstick by which schemes should be measured? I reiterate, in my view, it is the ability to pay claims, because the members of Renaissance Medical Scheme, Humanity Medical Scheme, Omni Health Medical Scheme, will be very, very interested to know why their claims weren't paid when those schemes went into liquidation.
Okay, all right, Mr. McHugh, we will let you go now, but before we do, we'll allow you 30 seconds, just for your final words.
Yeah, I think, as you've rightly indicated, the market is one which is a complicated one, and it is about value. Members need to have value. Momentum Health also offers its members great value, and I think Brian's scheme does the same. There's no, it's about creating value for a customer and which markets you operate in. So yes, I think Dr. Bloomberg's business has done very, very well over the years, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in every context for every single member it will be the best value for money, and that's the same for Momentum Health. We believe we offer our customers really good value. We have some outstanding benefit changes within this year. We haven't increased any of our co-payments across any of our options this year. Our increase is one of the lower ones. We also have multi-discipline plans which members can select from. So I think it's about obtaining value, and that does, because we compared ourselves to the other 10 larger medical schemes, does not mean for a second that Brian's business doesn't offer its members value. So the fact that we use the other larger medical schemes as a barometer doesn't mean that they're all better than Genesis by definition. So
okay.
That wasn't our gripe with anybody. We were just comparing ourselves against some of the other larger players because it makes up the vast majority of the membership within the industry.
Okay, thank you very much for having joined us. Mr. Damien McHugh is going to leave the conversation now. Mr. McHugh is the head of sales and marketing at Momentum Health. We continue our conversation about the complexities involved in medical aid schemes. Our guest is Mr. Brian Watson, an executive at Genesis Medical Scheme, and Dr. Jonathan Bloomberg, the CEO of Discovery Health, and we're taking your calls as well. Buhoshi, thank you for holding and welcome. Hi, Buhoshi.
Oh, hi. Sorry about that. I didn't hear that. Dumela Wanak. I've got a problem with medical schemes. If you look at them, they're cushioned by their investment income. In the market itself, in the medical field, they've made some 3.7 billion rand as income from their investments. Now, I'll talk about one particular medical aid. They increase, the trend is that they increase their subs by more than inflation rate. For instance, my medical aid, inflation is at the end of 2012 was 6.5 or 6%. They increased our subs by 7%. There are 5 plans on this medical aid. The one plan, they increased subs there by 25% on an inflation rate of 6%, and the rest of the other plans by 7%. Not only that, from there, they went ahead and took away benefits that were insured benefits from us. They took away all diagnostic benefits like your X-ray and your pathology.
Are you talking about one particular medical aid scheme or all of them in general?
Pardon?
Are you talking about one medical aid scheme?
No. The example that I'm making is one particular medical aid scheme that increased their subs by more than inflation rate. And having done that, they took away benefits that were insured benefits.
Okay, but if that scheme is neither Genesis nor Discovery, then my guests may not be able to comment on that.
Or are they only commenting on the two particular ones?
Not necessarily, but okay. Dr. Bloomberg would like to comment.
Thanks. I think it's an important.
Now, are you cutting me off before I finish? Because
I'm not.
I also, yeah.
Yes, okay, do finish.
That is my problem. Number 2, PMBs, all right? PMBs are supposed to be paid per invoice. Now, what the medical schemes are doing they will always pay medical aid rates and not per invoice, which is to our disadvantage because we've got to pick up the difference. Why are they doing that? Because it is to the detriment of the members.
You have asked your question. Thanks, Bukhoshi. Dr. Bloomberg.
Bukhoshi, thank you. I think you raised some important points. I think the first, I don't know which scheme you belong to, but the one thing I think that medical scheme members do need to understand is that the costs that all medical schemes face in our country every year do go up higher than consumer inflation. And the reason for that is that medical scheme members, for various reasons, are consuming more health care every year than they were before. Usually 2 or 3% more. So on average, if you look across medical schemes, you'll find that their costs are going up by consumer inflation plus around 3%. So it would be normal to expect, unfortunately, premiums to go up every year by more than CPI. Now, I know that's not a comforting information, but it is a fact of life. It is because there's more chronic disease. There are more expensive medicines on the market, more expensive technology, and all of that drives up cost for the medical aid more than price inflation, CPI.
Okay, so you're saying that medical aid fees are not related to the actual cost of healthcare?
No, what I'm saying is that they are related to the cost of healthcare. Medical aids have to break even every year. They must collect premiums enough to pay their claims every year. And what I am saying is that every year the medical aid schemes find that the cost of healthcare rises a bit faster than general price inflation. And that's why the members out there, all of us, do find that every year a little bit more goes out of our household income on medical aid than it did before, and a bit more than our wages go up. And the reason is that the cost of healthcare does go up faster than general inflation.
Okay, let's talk to Sig in Randburg. Welcome, Sig.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Rowena. I wanted to ask a couple of searching questions about watchdogs, ombudsman, and such likes. And yes, are the medical schemes themselves not obliged to be a watchdog over the private hospitals? Those are the only hospitals that work in this shocking country of us. We don't even have the hospitals that you and I used to go to when this was still working. Now we have to go to these exorbitant places, and they go up all the time. And are the medical schemes watching that? Shouldn't they get an ombudsman to watch the private hospitals? And the only ones that are working, because the other ones are totally destroyed. And then, what about a watchdog for the medical schemes? Have they got an ombudsman, and have they got other kinds of watchdogs? Have they got trustees? I know that the biggest Discovery did have trustees, and I was shocked when the trustees' wages, the trustees' income went up more than double. I don't know. It was a shocking figure that the trustees' wages went up by in 1 year. About 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, they went up incredibly. And guess why? Because they were bought by Discovery. The trustees were bought by Discovery, because no trustee would want to be sacked by Discovery when they are paid exorbitant wages. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Sig. I'll allow you to respond to that in a short while, Dr. Bloomberg. But before you do, I'd like to know, maybe bring you in again, Mr. Watson. And, apart from you writing this article, who polices the police? Who's the watchdog in the medical aid industry?
Well, Rowena, firstly, I think just to try and help Sig with his point, and I'll come to your point in a moment, it's helpful to remember that when a patient consults his doctor, there is a contract that exists between the doctor and the patient, and a medical scheme is not a party to that contract. Members then have a separate contract with their medical scheme, and the terms of those contracts are set out in the rules. So when a member shouts at the medical scheme, all the medical scheme is doing is enforcing the rules of the contract that was set up. So when it comes to complaints, you can go to the Council for Medical Schemes, but it's going to come back to the terms of the contract that the member has with the medical scheme. And there will be times, and Jonathan will know because he's a doctor, where sometimes a claim is subject to a clinical interpretation. So how does the clinical treatment that the member received, how does it fit into the rules? And that's where doctors assist. But at the end of the day, a contract exists between the member and the scheme.
Let's go straight now to Dr. Mukwele. Welcome, Dr. Mukwele.
Morning, Rowena. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Welcome.
All right, thanks. Yes, I've been following the conversation. And one of the complexities about medical aid schemes is that they are not in sync with the realities of patients and providers. There was a survey recently done about GEMS, the government employees medical scheme. And it put GEMS as first in one of the categories that was used there. And when we shared the conversation with colleagues, they laughed at it because dentists have had the hardest time with GEMS this year than ever. And unfortunately, most dentists are moving towards cash, which is why I say medical aid may not be in sync with the realities of what patients and providers are feeling at the moment. And personally, I am moving to a cash practice after 17 years of practicing on a mixed cash and medical aid practice. And most colleagues tell me that they wish they could be moving there. And what you hear from patients is that instead of sticking to medical aid, they wish they had the option to stash their money somewhere and maybe find a way of using the money, which is why now there will be in the near future capitation schemes owned by providers themselves, whereby we feel that we own the money that we use when patients need help. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, Dr. Mukwele, thank you for making your contribution. Let's move to Neil, and I'll allow Dr. Bloomberg and you, Mr. Watson, to respond to the calls. Yes, Neil, welcome.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I just want to, lodge my statement, my problem or query or whatever it is. All right, I've been on a Discovery now for about 4 years or so. And I do have a hospital plan, and I'm really, really, really sick. But I think it was sometime January last year. I had an incident. I just came back from a trip from China, and around about January, about 2-3 in the morning, I was in writhing pain, and quite seriously, it was quite a traumatic situation. Anyway, the ambulance rushed me to the hospital, and the doctors there on call determined that I needed to be admitted into hospital for observation and stuff like that. Yes. And I've got the hospital plan, not the full medical aid, but the normal hospital plan, coastal core, I think you call it. Anyway, the admin people at the hospital were struggling to get Discovery to authorize this so-called admittance. And I was in a position to even pay cash at the hospital, so I wasn't really concerned whether Discovery was going to honor that obligation or not. So anyway, over an hour and a half, and I can barely talk, eventually I had to get the hospital to put me on a wheelchair, get me to the admin people, get on the phone with Discovery, with the people they were communicating on the other side of the phone. I had to verbally abuse the person. I had to...
What's your question, Mr. Neil?
And eventually... the lady gets on the phone and says, no, but there's no problem. We are welcome now to admit you, and this is authorized from us, Mr. Kirsten. Everything is going to be 100%, and so on and so on and so on. So anyway, the procedure went on, and I refused, although they authorized it.
Neil,
I refused.
Neil, can you get to the point, please, and ask your question?
Yes. The point is that you can belong to the best medical aid, but it's not necessarily going to get the best service. And one thing that I think any medical aid should have, instead of just a national ombudsman, you should have your customer relationship people who can respond to clients' queries, like I'm making my point of my experience,
all right,
so that we can get the necessary response accordingly. Not just each time we phone in, a different person is explaining, taking your communication, and you never get to the end result.
Thank you, Neil. Let's move to Donna in KZN. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, Rowena. Thank you for a lovely program. In fact, it's very, very good timing. I have been searching for medical aid. I've been here for a brief time, but I've been sort of looking around, and I just couldn't find anything that's appropriate. Everything was just like a maze. I did call Discovery, in fact, and I needed to speak to somebody directly, but I was directed to a broker, and I thought, I'm not buying real estate. Why do I need a broker? It was quite confusing, and eventually I had somebody who had to send me via email the long list. It was like a maze. I am in a healthcare worker. I couldn't even make anything out of it. It was just quite confusing. In fact, I'm really, really glad to hear Mr. Watson talking about really the basic stuff of medical aid. You're supposed to go in and somewhere probably where you're able to talk to somebody or, directly answer your questions.
Absolutely. It's very important. And right at the beginning, Mr. Watson, you mentioned that a lot of members don't really know how the medical aid industry works. Before we get to that, I'd like you to respond, Dr. Bloomberg, to the many calls that have come through, SIG saying that your trustees were bought by Discovery, and also Dr. Mugwele saying that medical aid schemes are not really in sync with the reality of members, and Neil making his point as well that there is not much service when it comes to servicing your clients, and Donna's call just a short while ago.
Sure, let me try and take them all one by one. I think Sig's point on the trustees is grossly inaccurate. So it's important for your listeners to understand that the trustees of a medical scheme are elected by the members. They're not paid by Discovery Health. They are paid by the medical scheme, which is owned by the members. Discovery's trustees, there are 7 of them, are highly skilled, independent professionals. They're lawyers, doctors, and business people. They give up valuable time. They have huge responsibility. They care for a scheme with, assets of 9.5 billion rand and a huge responsibility. And for that, they are paid a market-related fee similar to the the non-executive directors of a company. So SIG's comments are completely inaccurate. On Mr. Kirsten's points, look, Discovery Health takes 97,000 calls a day from our members. We authorize 50,000 hospital admissions every month. The vast majority of them are authorized immediately on the call.
Who's Mr. Kirsten? Neil?
Right, Neil.
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. You know him personally?
No, he mentioned his name as well. Sorry.
Right.
We do make mistakes. There are service issues. We work incredibly hard to improve the service. We get average ratings from our members on a score of 1 to 10 of 8.9 to 9 consistently. So we do try and improve our service all the time. I should also point out to Neil that in any medical emergency, such as you were experiencing, a hospital is obliged by law to admit you regardless of whether there's an authorization or not, and they can get the authorization afterwards. So that's also important for listeners to understand. I think on Dr. Mukele's point about patients and doctors and medical schemes being out of sync, look, I think I'd have to say we're all together in a complicated environment. And one of the ironies, I think, of the Genesis statement and of how this all started is that all of us in the private healthcare system seem to spend most of our energy pointing fingers at each other, criticizing each other, accusing each other of this and that. Actually, what we really need is statesman-like leadership working together, because all of us are facing very difficult, challenging problems, and our customers are confused and unhappy very often, and there are many good reasons and difficult reasons for that, but it needs leadership and collaboration, not finger pointing and accusations. That just plays into the hands of those who feel that private healthcare doesn't have a legitimate place in our country, whereas our belief is that our private healthcare system is a precious national asset without which our economy would be in serious difficulty.
Excuse me, Mr. Watson, talk about that possible collaboration with other medical aid schemes. Do you foresee that happening?
I absolutely agree 100% with what Jonathan says. It is perfectly what should happen. Unfortunately, the representative body that used to, well, it does exist, the Board of Healthcare Funders, has not fulfilled that role, I think, to the extent that it should have. But, Jonathan, if I may, and I agree with what you're saying, that we shouldn't point fingers, and I'm aggrieved that you think we've pointed fingers at you. But if I may just ask you this, why was it necessary to say that your increase is the lowest in the industry? Because your 8.9% is 8.9% of what? It is only 8.9% increase on average for the members of Discovery. It means nothing to me because I'm not a member of yours. That means that your contribution increase could be between 0 and 18%. Now, what does that mean in rands? So why do you have to say we're lower than everybody else? It's a meaningless figure. And I'm going to make a statement that nobody can compare a medical scheme to another based on contributions alone. It's an absolutely meaningless exercise because every medical scheme has different benefits and a different benefit design. And when Jonathan earlier says, well, you see, Genesis has just got to have 1 or 2 big claims and it's gone. Well, sir, with great respect, it all depends on the benefit design. It's not appropriate for you to just attack us like this, and you know better. It's about benefit design. So medical schemes can't be compared on contribution alone. So I'll ask you, when you talk about pointing fingers, why did you have to say you're the lowest increase? And then you perpetuate it this morning by repeating it. You can say to our members, our increase is an average 8.9% for the year. That's fantastic. And anybody who's a Discovery can try and make sense of that.
Brian, I agree that the true measure of medical schemes is the value that members get. It is also the size and stability, as I've said. Benefit design is part of it, but any medical scheme of your size could have 100 claims like Discovery got last year, which would wipe out the reserve. So any financial expert, any regulator, anyone who understands financial services knows that a larger size scheme in an insurance environment is far safer than a smaller one. On your point about the lowest increases, look, the fact of the matter is that in most of our efforts in talking to the brokers and to our members are focused on our key competitors. Those are the 10 largest open schemes. We track the average annual increases, and over the last 4 years, 5 years, 6, 7 years, if you look at the averages, our increases have been the lowest. What actually matters, though, as you rightly say, is value, which is wide plan choice, good benefits for your family's needs, and premiums. And of course there's competition. That's good for customers. We welcome competition from you and from Momentum and from everybody else. I do think that this kind of, the statement you put out simply highlights conflict between stakeholders in the private sector rather than working together. So this all started with your statement, not with anything that we've said in response.
Okay, and I'll allow you both to have your closing statements. But first, let's read some SMSs. Schemes like Discovery bribe and collude with brokers to win big business like Lonman, and they exclude black doctors with racist networks like, is it ISO Leso and PPN Optimum, while doctors get preference from most schemes, regards PDI Health Professional. I have had my approved chronic medication being paid from my savings, resulting in my funds being exhausted by March this year. Okay, I'm not sure where the question is. All right. Momentum sucks, and the only reason my company opted for Momentum is because the CEO has a family member working there, and due to this bad choice, I have to suffer. That's Paul. Got caught with a dishonest broker, and when reported to Discovery, it fell on deaf ears. Now I'm unable to join elsewhere, says Rashid. It's strange that not one single caller is happy with their medical aid, says Paul. And those are the SMSs that have come through. In response, Dr. Broomberg, and just as your closing statement.
So I think just, perhaps one thing that's really important for people to understand is that in any 1 year, in any medical aid, about 80% of the members are paying in more in premiums than they're getting back in claims. And that's because they're young or healthy, and thankfully their family didn't need the medical aid that year. But those people, if you like, are, the worried well. They're cross that they feel like they're not getting good value. But remember that the 20% of sick families in the year consume all of the extra money, because medical aids break even every year. And you never know when your family will be in the 20%, when you'll have the 5 million rand claim, or the premature baby that's born that costs 2 million rand in the ICU, or a terrible car accident or cancer, which can cost 500,000 or 1 million. So I think it's crucial for us all to understand that, your medical aid may not feel like good value this year, but what we never hear from, and the people who don't phone in, are the 20%. Because they are getting paid claims of hundreds of thousands or millions, very grateful for it, but they're not the ones who call in and speak in the media. And I think it is important to understand that medical aid is a lifetime contract, and it's there when you truly need it for the very big things.
Thanks, Dr. Bloomberg. And Mr. Watson, your closing statements?
Thank you. Jonathan, it's unfortunate that you persist in your assertion that because we're small and if we have a few big claims, Genesis will be wiped out. I absolutely refute that, and it's unfortunate because you have such big claims because you have more members. So exponentially, you've got as much chance of getting wiped out. We have 34,000 Rand per member as against your 10. So which is bigger? As far as the brokers are concerned, it's also unfortunate that you didn't mention to the public that brokers' commission is based on contributions. The higher the contributions, the higher the commission. So a scheme like Genesis, which keeps its contributions lower, it's not favored by the brokers because they get a lower commission, and brokers are running a business. So
unfortunately, Dr. Bloomberg had wanted to respond to that, but we have run out of time. Thank you to both of you, Dr. Jonathan Bloomberg, CEO of Discovery Health, and Mr. Brian Watson, Executive at Genesis Medical Scheme, talking about the complexities in the medical aid scheme world.